Alan, thanks so much for taking the time to sit and have this conversation.
Absolutely great to be here, Patrick. Thank you.
So let's talk about your story and background that got you doing what you're doing. Tell us about where you grew up and kind of how you evolved into the work you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. So I come from a great place, Hawaii. I grew up in a small town on the north shore of the island of Oahu, a town that has 2,600 people. We got our first stoplight just recently, so we're moving up there. But growing up in Hawaii is beautiful, but it also has its challenges. As you probably know, you've been there many times. It's very, very expensive, and to live and survive, it takes some strategy and some thinking. And so the family situation I came from was awesome. I have a beautiful, amazing family. The only difficult thing for us was our financial situation. What that meant for me as a child was I grew up on the free lunch program from the time I started kindergarten till I graduated high school. We had WIC, we had food stamps, and we had all these different types of services just to survive. That's why today I absolutely hate eating Kick cereal, right? Because that was the only thing. You go shopping for groceries, your parents say, okay, you can only get the thing that says WIC next to it, which was Kicks, cornflakes, all the stuff that had no sugar.
When people go and visit Hawaii, and you're at the beautiful resorts and all that, I guess the people who actually, are born there, live there, etc. There's not a lot of wealth, I think, for the locals in general. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yeah. So most people are living paycheck to paycheck, and to kind of get by. Families are living together to afford the rent, or if they're lucky, to actually afford the mortgage to pay for the house. And so, those struggles that I had growing up really molded me into the person that I am today, as somebody that's very passionate about personal finance. You see, I really wanted to know how money worked, and so I dedicated a large portion of my life to figuring things out. And once I felt like I had enough that was starting to help me, I took all of my life savings, which at the time was about $20,000. I was married, we had 2 little children, and we were renting a place. And I said, I'm going to start something I'm passionate about, which is teaching people about personal finance. So I started a small company. I named it 101 Financial because I felt like that was the beginning. That was the thing that I was missing. See, growing up in Hawaii, I saw this wealth. I saw the nice resorts. I saw the nice cars and things that could be possible, but I didn't see a pathway for me to get there. And I was searching, I was looking for ways to learn. And I read all these great books on how to flip houses and make millions of dollars, stocks, business, and all this stuff. But my concern was, how do I get to that point where I can buy a house? How do I get enough money to start a business or get into the stock market? That was my big dilemma. And so I created a program that was helping me, that could help others. And so I started this small company and I started teaching people. And little did I know that there was more people that wanted to be part of this financial literacy movement that we were starting to create in the islands.
And is that right? Is that the thing? Is it financial literacy? Because I could imagine that when you're living paycheck to paycheck, there's, I guess some opportunity maybe working at resorts or something, but probably not a lot of other industry that's got a lot of potential where you can move upward into executive positions and have high salaried jobs. Because I wondered the same thing. You'd be sitting there saying, how do I even get started to be able to do any investing, et cetera? And is that the core of what you had to figure out? And once you figure it out for yourself, you say, okay, great. What made you want to bring it to other people's?
Well, once I started to discover what the banks were doing to us, I was like, why don't people talk about this stuff? Like,
what are they doing to you?
So the banks are, they're taking our paychecks. That's why they set up direct deposits for just about everyone now. Why? It's free for your employer, but they get your money every Thursday night at midnight. Direct deposit, and every night they're using it. They're sweeping it out of our accounts, they're taking it and they're investing and they're earning interest, all while they're paying us nothing. And I started to get furious about this, like, why don't people talk about this? Why don't we know this stuff? And does anyone even care? And so I did a lot of research on banks, trying to figure out how do they work, what products they offer, and how can we get some of those things to work for us, for the hardworking middle class. And I started to figure these things out, and it started to work.
So you started to figure these things out. What things did you actually do personally that started working for you?
Okay, so when I first started to figure this out, I was a renter, and trying to go out and teach people about personal finance was a little difficult when you're renting. Why? Because people are like, dude, you don't even own a house, and you're trying to tell me how to manage my money and pay off my debt. Well, fortunately, I was able to use some of these things that I learned. For example, when we take our paychecks, we put it in our checking account. The bank sweeps it out every night. They earn interest. We basically get zero. We found other tools at the bank that I call, like, what we call a debt checking account. So where we could put our entire paycheck against our debt and suppress the balance for a day, a week, or a month. And by suppressing the balance, we save on what we call daily calculated interest. Why? Because the banks charge you and I interest against the outstanding balance, and they do it daily. So we found a way to reduce the daily balance, which thereby saves us interest every day. Then I would take that interest that I would save, and I'd use that to pay down more of my principal. So I could, in effect, pay down principal without having to earn more money. I looked at every dime that was leaving my pocket, right? You're like, okay, what do we spend on groceries, gas, our cell phone, etc. Well, one of the biggest expenses that we have is our debt payments. And the biggest piece of the debt payment is the interest cost. Right. So we said, if we can reduce the interest cost, we could free up that money and use that to help us pay down more principal, thereby getting out of debt faster. And once you start to get out of debt faster, you now free up cash flow to be able to invest. And that's what I started to do. Was I took that extra money that I had and I started to invest in real estate. And so we lived in this little apartment on the North Shore of Oahu. It was less than 1,000 square feet, and we were able to pay that house off in 2 years and 3 months. And I used those.
Paid it off in 2 years?
Paid it off. Paid off the complete mortgage in 2 years and 3 months.
How'd you do that?
With that principle. Wow. With that principle, and also with managing my cash flow, just tracking every dollar coming in, every dollar going out, just being aware. You see, most people don't even know what's going on in their financial lives. I think the statistic is like 78% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. It's pretty scary.
And maybe is it a sign of resignation, you think, psychologically? Because I see that a lot, and I imagine even on the islands it could be a lot worse. Basically, we don't make enough money to do really much of anything. Me trying to spend all this energy tracking a couple bucks here or there is not going to matter. In your case, you're saying it does matter.
Absolutely. Every dime matters. And once you get into that mentality, then you start to value your money more. You start to value the paycheck that you're earning from your job. And once you know how to make it work for you, you get more excited. But when you don't understand what's happening with your money, then it doesn't really matter. 30 years is 30 years. Who cares? I might be dead by the time I pay off that mortgage. So who cares? Let's just have fun. But it doesn't have to be that way.
No. So do you? What I'm hearing, there's a mindset, around this. So when you start working with people, how much of it is you working on their mindset versus how much of it is the mechanics of following some kind of a process?
It's probably 50% or more. But the first thing we do before we can change their mind, because they're already in a negative mindset, first thing we have to do is show them their numbers. Get to a starting point. So we map everything out. What are you paying for this? What are you paying for this? It is a little tedious. It's hard work. That's why most financial advisors don't ever get into someone's budget. It's the dirty work. But that's where it all begins.
So can you maybe do the walkthrough? I'm the somebody, okay? Walk me through the process. So I come to you and I say, okay, I've got some debt. Really doesn't feel like I have much disposable income at all. I rent. I'd like to somehow
buy a house one day.
Yeah, buy a house one day and have some kind of financial security. What would what are my steps? What would I do?
The first thing we do is we have to create a starting line. Before we can see the finish line, right? The finish line for you might be, I want to buy my first house. Well, what's the starting line? Which means we got to track your income, all sources of income. What are your expenses? We want to list every expense, everything that leaves your pocket to pay for something, we're going to track it. And then we're going to look at all of your liabilities. What type of debt you have, credit cards, car loans, mortgages, maybe some student debt, and we're going to map it all out. Once we have this roadmap, and I'll tell you, it's a simple thing, but 95% of people don't ever write it down. It's the craziest thing. But once they do write it down, they can start to see. Then we start to formulate a roadmap according to what they want to do. Now, before you buy a house, probably the biggest thing that you got to do is get your cash flow in line and then get out of debt. And all the best investors in the world all preach that for working class families, the best thing they can do is get out of their high interest debt.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett says that, Mark Cuban says that, Kiyosaki says that. You got a 25% interest rate on your card, your credit card. You need to take care of that before you can buy your first rental property.
Right.
And that's the step.
So let's say on Oahu,
Yep.
the typical person that is there that's making the decision to move in this direction, try to get more financially abundant, disciplined, what have you. When you see them, what's the typical predicament as far as how much disposable income they have, or what's the timeline and effort to really be able to pay down some debt?
So most people, 65% of people will have a mortgage, and they will have 25 to 30 years remaining because they had just probably gone through a refi or they just bought it. So that's so far away from them that they can't even comprehend that. So we create these short-term wins for them. So we build what we call these 90-day financial roadmaps, where we track every dollar coming in, every dollar going out, and we do it for a minimum of 90 days. Once we get them to do it for 90 days, then we go 6 months, and then we go to a year. And now, once they have this roadmap, now we can start to find areas that we are lacking in. So we might be spending too much here, or we might be doing this, this type of activity where we could cut down on. And then we start to say, okay, which debt can we attack first? And if you go by the numbers, it's always best to pay off the highest interest debt first. And we do that in probably 95% of the cases. And so let's say you had a credit card. Average credit card interest rate in America is around 14 to 16%. That will pigeonhole anyone for the rest of their life if they don't take care of that. So we go after that, and then we start to pay the minimums on everything else. And once we free up that payment, then we start to attack the next, all while we're using our paycheck against our debt. So we have multiple things happening. So we got the tracking going on, the roadmap. Then we got our paychecks working for us every single day. And see, once you start to teach people the why and the how, it creates a mind shift. Their mind starts to change. So it's not a diet anymore where it goes away. It becomes a habit, a new habit. And then they start to see themselves winning for the first time ever. That, man, my money's working for me. I'm getting ahead. I paid off this debt. Now what can I do? I'm going to go after the next one. And then they see home ownership becoming a reality. And that's exactly what happened for me. Is once I saw that struggle of managing the day-to-day finances go away, I saw that I could attack this mortgage and pay it off quickly. And once I did, the whole world opened up for me. And within 5 years, I had 7 properties in Hawaii, and one of those properties was a 17-acre lot on the North Shore. And here's what I realized personally is that my mind was so cluttered with just trying to survive at the beginning that I had no energy or time to be able to focus on building wealth. And that's the problem for most Americans. They are working so hard. They come home, they're struggling with the bills, and they can't ever think about how do I build wealth.
Thanks so much for being here and watching that video. And can I ask you to please subscribe to our channel so you can find out when we're posting new content. You'll be alerted right away when we do. To share this with people you think might benefit from the information, and certainly it helps us if you like the video. So if you like what you just saw, go ahead and hit that like button. And again, thank you so much for being here with me right now.